Have you ever wondered if a 3,000-year-old Egyptian pharaoh truly possessed the power to murder 22 people from beyond the grave? Welcome to This Explainer. I am so excited you're here. Today, we're stepping right into the shadows of the ancient world to unpack one of the absolute greatest mysteries and honestly most terrifying legends in human history. We are going to separate the Hollywood-style horror from the hard scientific facts. Picture this. The year is 1923. You're in a lavish hotel room in Cairo, Egypt. George Herbert, better known as Lord Carnarvon, this very wealthy British aristocrat, is fighting for his life. He's suffering from a brutal fever, he can barely breathe. And then, at exactly 1:55 in the morning, he takes his final breath. But it's what happened next that truly shook the world. The very moment Lord Carnarvon's heart stopped, the entire city of Cairo was suddenly plunged into complete darkness. A massive, unexplained electrical blackout. And if that wasn't eerie enough, thousands of miles away in England, at that exact same second, his beloved pet dog abruptly sat right up, began howling into the night, and just dropped dead. But to really get how this all started, we actually need to rewind just a few months to November 1922. Lord Carnarvon had spent 15 long years, and literally millions in modern money, funding this desperate search by a humble archaeologist named Howard Carter. On November 4th, this eerie silence fell over their excavation site. By the 5th, they had uncovered hidden stairs. On the 24th, they found a door marked with the royal seal of Anubis, the god of the underworld. And finally, on November 26th, they broke through. Imagine the anticipation. After 3,000 years of unbroken silence, Carter chisels a tiny hole in the doorway. Hot air rushes out from the darkness. He holds up a candle and peers inside. Standing right next to him, a very anxious Lord Carnarvon asks if he can see anything. Overwhelmed, Carter just whispered these immortal words, "Wonderful things." What he saw was the completely intact royal treasury of King Tutankhamun. We're not just talking a few pots and pans here. They cataloged a staggering 5,398 ancient artifacts. This was, without a doubt, the greatest archaeological discovery in human history. Unlike the other 60 tombs in the Valley of the Kings that had been looted centuries ago, this one was absolutely untouched by time. To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at the sheer scale of the discovery. Inside was a 10-kilo solid gold death mask, multiple gold-plated chariots, a solid gold coffin. There was even a dagger forged from an actual meteorite. In today's money, the artifacts inside that single sealed room hold an estimated value of 8,400 cores. Just a treasure completely beyond human imagination. Okay, so that brings us to part one. The curse begins, and the terrifying omens. Things started getting weird almost immediately. First, Howard Carter's pet canary was unexpectedly eaten by a royal cobra, which just happens to be the very symbol of the Egyptian monarchy. Locals started whispering that the king had sent his serpent for revenge. Then these rumors spread like wildfire about a warning inscribed right on the tomb saying, "Death comes on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king." And shortly after that, Lord Carnarvon got a strange insect bite on his cheek that became severely infected. And it just snowballed from there. Soon the global press is reporting that a literal ancient curse is active. Over the next few years, 22 people linked to the tomb suffered horrific, unexplainable deaths. The doctor who x-rayed the mummy died suddenly. An American visitor caught a fatal fever the very next day. And tragically, the 78-year-old Lord Westbury, absolutely terrified after his son died of a sudden heart attack, jumped from his 7th-floor apartment in London. Mass hysteria completely took over the globe. But wait, let's move on to part two, where we let science step in and debunk this superstition. Let's look at the real silent killer that was lurking in the tomb. Fast forward to 1933, and a German epidemiologist points out that ancient sealed tombs are the perfect breeding grounds for a highly toxic fungus called Aspergillus niger. When those explorers opened the doors, they basically inhaled 3,000-year-old fungal spores, which rapidly attacked their lungs, causing severe respiratory failure and those sudden fevers. And, we really have to remember the era we're talking about here. The 1920s had a massive medicine gap. Antibiotics like penicillin hadn't even been discovered yet. Lord Carnarvon already had a really weak immune system, which is exactly why he was living in Egypt for his health in the first place. So back then, a simple fungal infection, or a nasty mosquito bite that led to blood poisoning, was a fatal death sentence. So let's map those sensational claims against the actual facts. That incredibly spooky Cairo blackout, electrical grid failures in 1920s Cairo were super common. It was just normal infrastructure failure. And the dog dying at the exact same moment? Well, Carnarvon died at 1:55 a.m. in Cairo, but his dog died at 4 a.m. UK time. The time zones completely mismatched. They didn't even happen at the same time. Oh, and what about that chilling inscription about the swift wings of death? Yeah, it literally never existed. It was completely fabricated by a famous novelist named Marie Corelli. She just wrote it in a letter to the Daily Express. It wasn't even written in ancient Egyptian. She, along with a bunch of other news agencies, just made the whole thing up to sell newspapers, totally exploiting the public's fascination with the macabre. Same goes for the famous rumor that the mummy had a scar on its cheek perfectly matching Lord Carnarvon's fatal insect bite. Again, pure fiction. Here's what happened. The London Times had bought the exclusive reporting rights to the tomb. A rival newspaper, the Morning Post, was so incredibly angry about being locked out of the scoop that they simply printed a petty lie to generate their own headlines. To put the final nail in the coffin of this curse, let's look at a comprehensive 2002 medical journal study. Researchers tracked all the Westerners who were present at the opening of the tomb. And you know what they found? The study proved that the so-called cursed individuals actually outlived the normal life expectancy of their era. The average age of death for those exposed to the tomb was actually between 70 and 75 years old. Think about it. The people who were literally the very first ones to breach the tomb, the ones who should have suffered the absolute worst of the Pharaoh's wrath, lived long, exceptionally healthy lives. Lady Evelyn, Carnarvon's daughter and one of the very first inside, lived to 78. Dr. Douglas Derry, the man who actually cut open the mummy, lived to 87. And Howard Carter himself, the man who broke the seal, lived a full life, dying of natural causes at 64. Which leaves us with part 3, the real Tutankhamun behind that golden mask. If he wasn't this powerful, vengeful spirit, who was the boy beneath the mask? When we strip away all the gold, modern science reveals a deeply tragic, frail young man. He was born of severe royal inbreeding. His parents were very likely siblings. Because of this, he suffered from a painful clubfoot, severe genetic defects, and chronic malaria. Plus, evidence shows he sustained a major trauma to the back of his head. He became king at just 9 years old and was dead by 18. Here's the detail that just breaks my heart. Out of all the thousands of artifacts in his tomb, they didn't just bury him with gold and chariots. They buried him with 130 walking sticks. He needed them just to take a single step. They placed them in his tomb so that he wouldn't have to suffer and struggle to stand in the afterlife. And that brings us to our final section, the true immortality. You see, for the ancient Egyptians, your heart stopping wasn't really the end. They believed in a second death. They truly believed that a person only dies for good when the very last person on earth stops saying their name out loud. To be completely forgotten, that was the ultimate curse. And because Tutankhamun's successors hated his father, they tried to completely erase his entire family's existence from history. They struck his name from the monuments, but because his name was erased, the tomb raiders never even knew to look for him. That is exactly why he was left untouched, but completely forgotten, sitting in the absolute dark for 3 millennia. So I want to leave you with this thought to mull over. Howard Carter didn't unleash a deadly curse. Far from cursing his discoverer, didn't Carter actually rescue this frail, forgotten boy king from the darkness? By uncovering him, by speaking his name again, and sharing his story with the entire world, Carter gave him the exact immortality he was promised. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope it changed how you see history.